Welcome to Starbound. My name is General G, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Freyr and Remeke. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes in future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. Marine Sergeant Carlos Rios had trained for nearly every combat scenario the Corps could imagine. Zero-gravity firefights, methane atmosphere operations, first contact procedures with species ranging from silicon-based hive minds to sentient gas clouds. He'd memorized 43 different ways to neutralize hostile threats while maintaining diplomatic composure, and could field strip a pulse rifle blindfolded in under 30 seconds. None of that training had covered what to do when your left combat boot began glowing purple during the most important diplomatic reception in human history. The luminous veins started at the heel, spreading across the worn leather like ancient script. Each pulse synchronized with his heartbeat, currently hammering at twice its normal rate. He stood at attention in the receiving line aboard the Harmony's Edge, humanity's first integrated diplomatic vessel, watching the inexplicable light reflected in the polished deck plating. Stay calm, he told himself. Maybe it's just a trick of the light. Maybe the Altarian's natural luminescence is reflecting off the polish. But the tingling in his foot suggested otherwise. It felt like his boot was breathing. Sergeant Rios. Ambassador Natasha Rostova's voice was sharp enough to cut steel. The head of Earth's diplomatic mission stood 3 meters to his left, her smile fixed in that particular way that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Is there a problem?" "No, ma'am," Rios replied through clenched teeth. The tingling was spreading up his ankle now, a sensation like carbonated water under his skin. "Everything's 5 by 5. The reception hall of the Harmony's Edge had been designed by committee, which in intergalactic terms meant it offended all species equally. The atmosphere was a carefully maintained balance of 16 different gas mixtures, creating zones of breathable air for beings that required everything from pure methane to noble gas combinations that would kill most carbon-based life instantly. The gravity fluctuated in calculated patterns to accommodate different physiologies, and the lighting spectrum included wavelengths visible only to multifaceted lenses, thermal sensors, and one species that navigated by magnetic fields. Rios had been chosen for the honor guard specifically for his ability to remain stoic in the face of sensory chaos. He'd once stood at attention for 6 hours, while Theranthian dignitaries shed their scales in a ceremonial molting that filled the air with what could only be described as the sense of burning seafood. He'd maintained perfect composure during a Zenthran diplomatic dance that involved 47 participants and lasted 3 days. He could handle a little foot discomfort. The purple glow was getting brighter. Around him, the reception continued with the carefully choreographed precision of intergalactic diplomacy. The Benzari delegation, tall, ethereal beings who communicated through harmonic resonance, had arranged themselves in a formation that created a standing wave of sound barely audible to human ears. The Rigoid Bureaucratic Collective had deployed their finest administrators, their exoskeletons polished to mirror brightness, documentation tendrils at the ready to record every nuance of the proceedings. And floating before him now, approaching with the stately grace of a living aurora, was Ambassador Shiala of the Altarian Republic. Shiala was considered beautiful by her species standards, a being the size of a shuttlecraft, her consciousness distributed through a million tiny facets that caught and refracted light in patterns that human eyes could barely process. She sang constantly, her voice a layered chorus of tones that existed in frequencies beyond human hearing, creating harmonies that seemed to make the air itself shimmer. "Sergeant Rios?" she intoned, her voice like bells made of starlight. "I am honored to meet one of Earth's warriors. Your species' capacity for discipline under pressure is legendary among the Council races." It wasn't meant as an insult. The Altarians had fought the bloodiest war in galactic history, a 1,000-year conflict, using weapons that deleted their enemies from causality itself. The fact that they now pursued radical pacifism, having seen the ultimate futility of violence, only made them more appreciative of those who still walked the warrior's path with honor. "The honor is mine, Ambassador," Rios replied, extending his hand as procedure demanded. The movement sent fresh waves of tingling up his leg. "Earth stands ready to learn from the wisdom of the Altarian people." The ambassador manifested a tendril of living light, reaching toward him with delicate grace. Her form pulsed with colors that had no names in any human language, patterns that spoke of joy and welcome and the deep contentment of beings who had found peace after eons of war. That's when his boot erupted. The sound of glittering spores burst from the leather with an almost musical chime, each particle catching the light like microscopic stars. They spiraled upward in a perfect double helix, defying the localized gravity fields, drawn to the ambassador as if magnetized by her unique crystalline biology. Time seemed to slow. Rios watched in horror as the spores made contact with Shiala's form, each one finding a facet to bond with. The ambassador's melodious voice hitched, warbled, then dissolved into something unprecedented in the 100,000-year history of her species. She giggled. Not the dignified amusement of a cosmic being, but the helpless, bubbling laughter of someone who had just discovered the universe's funniest joke. "Oh my!" Ambassador Shiala's form pulsed with colors that shifted through spectra no human had ever seen. This is extraordinary. Did you know that the Altarian defense grid uses a rotating cipher based on prime numbers derived from our sun's pulse patterns? The master code is, this feels wonderful. 77 Alpha 9 phasic helix. Oh dear, I shouldn't be saying this. The reception hall fell deadly still. 200 dignitaries from 43 species stood frozen in various expressions of shock and horror. The Benzari delegation's harmonic pattern dissolved into discordant noise. The Rigoid administrator's documentation tendrils began recording frantically, their compound eyes reflecting the chaos in thousands of tiny mirrors. Security Chief Davies' hand had moved instinctively to her sidearm, but she seemed unsure which standing order covered "diplomatic infected by boot fungus reveals state secrets while giggling uncontrollably." "The encryption keys," Shiala continued, her form now pulsing in a rhythm of pure cosmic laughter, "are updated every 73 hours using a seed derived from the birth cries of newborn stars. And the backup codes are hidden in the genetic sequence of sacred moss. Why have I never noticed how absolutely hilarious that is?" Near the refreshment alcove, a Thorunian ambassador began backing away from a human diplomat who was suddenly swaying and humming. The Mokari delegation, beings of living silicon who conducted diplomacy through carefully controlled electromagnetic pulses, were registering alarm patterns that hadn't been seen since the Devourer Wars. "Medical emergency!" Dr. Kiko Ishikawa's voice cut through the room like a scalpel through flesh. She burst from the science delegation section, medkit in hand, her black hair escaping from its formal arrangement. "Atmospheric contamination protocol now! Everyone remain calm and follow evacuation procedures!" Ambassador Rostova's fixed smile never wavered, but Rios could see the calculations behind her eyes. Career trajectories being revised, contingency plans activated, the precise amount of blame to be apportioned. Her diplomatic training was legendary, but even she had never prepared for a scenario where humanity's admission to the Galactic Coalition might be derailed by footwear. "Sergeant Rios," she said in a voice of deadly calm, "you will accompany Dr. Ishikawa immediately. No questions, no delays." "Ma'am, I—" "Now, Sergeant!" Emergency klaxons wailed as blast shields slammed down with reverberating thuds. The reception hall's sophisticated atmosphere management system switched to emergency mode, creating isolation zones around different species groups. The Benzari found themselves in a methane-rich environment, while the Thuranians were given increased humidity and trace amounts of sulfur compounds that helped them think clearly during stress. Every screen in the ship, from the grand diplomatic displays to personal communication devices, flashed the same ominous designation in 43 languages. Class 3 Biohazard, consciousness-altering agent. Remain in place, await decontamination. Through the chaos, Rios caught glimpses of the spreading phenomenon. A human technical specialist was now giggling while explaining the intimate details of Earth's orbital defense platforms to a very confused Rigoid engineer. Two Thuranian cultural attachés were beginning to shed scales in what appeared to be emotional distress, while nearby humans started laughing at the sight. Rios stared at his boot, where the purple veins were already fading like dying embers, leaving only the familiar scuffed leather he'd spent 3 hours polishing that morning. The same boots his grandfather had worn through the Australian intervention. The same boots that had walked the red sands of Mars during the separation riots, had stood firm on the bridge of the Victorious during the Battle of Europa Station, had carried 3 generations of Rios family honor through humanity's darkest and finest hours. The same boots that had just possibly ended humanity's probationary membership in the Galactic Coalition. "Sergeant?" Dr. Ishikawa appeared at his elbow, tricorder ready, taking readings. She was younger than he'd expected for someone with her reputation, maybe 28, with the kind of intense focus that suggested she dreamed in molecular structures and woke up solving equations. "I need you to come with me immediately, and whatever you do, don't take those boots off. We need to maintain the contamination chain." "Doc, I don't understand what just—" "Save it for debrief." She turned to Ambassador Rostova, who was somehow still managing to look diplomatically composed despite the chaos. "Ma'am, I need to invoke emergency medical protocol. This takes precedence over all diplomatic concerns." Rostova's smile finally cracked. "Dr. Ishikawa, do you have any idea what just happened? Ambassador Shiala is revealing defense secrets that could destabilize half the galaxy. The Benzari delegation is already transmitting emergency reports to their homeworld. The Rigoids are activating their ship's weapon systems." "All the more reason to act quickly," Ishikawa replied. Around them, security teams were establishing containment corridors, their movements economical and direct despite the chaos. Emergency medical personnel were deploying atmospheric scrubbers and isolation fields. "Unless you prefer to explain to the Galactic Council why we allowed an unknown pathogen to spread throughout the entire diplomatic fleet?" Through the transparent aluminum window, Rios could see other Coalition ships adjusting their positions. The Eternal Vigilance, pride of the Rigoid fleet, had raised its shields and was backing away from the Harmony's edge. Smaller vessels were peeling off from the formation as if the human ship had suddenly become radioactive. Which, Rios reflected as another wave of tingling ran up his leg, might not be far from the truth. "Sergeant!" Davies called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had maintained security during 3 different first contact scenarios. "I need you to move, now!" As they hustled through the ship's corridors, Rio caught glimpses of the spreading chaos. In the engineering section, a human tech was explaining humanity's faster-than-light communication protocols to a Benzari engineer, while both of them laughed uncontrollably. A Thuranian diplomat was shedding scales in distress, while a human attaché tried to comfort her by sharing embarrassing stories about his childhood. The isolation ward's walls thrummed with the constant hum of Level 5 containment fields, designed to hold everything from the rogue nanobots to sentient viruses. The medical bay had been expanded with additional atmospheric processors, creating a sealed environment that could support life while preventing any contamination from spreading. Rio sat on the examination table, still in full-dress uniform except for his feet. His boots now resided in a sealed specimen container that looked capable of withstanding a direct antimatter strike. Through the transparent walls, he could see Dr. Ishikawa and her team working with desperate efficiency. "Let me get this straight," Dr. Ishikawa said, as raw data flowed past in rivers of light. Spectral analyses, molecular structures, probability cascades. "This is the third incident this week, but the first two were different?" "That's what security logged," Rios offered, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. "Gibson on Tuesday morning during PT, but they said he just had some kind of anxiety attack. Started laughing uncontrollably, babbling about his childhood fears. Medical sedated him, said it was stress-related." "And Williams?" "Thursday afternoon in engineering. She was doing maintenance near some Benzari equipment when she started acting strange, giggling, talking nonsense about invisible devices and secret codes. The Benzari tech working with her reported it as a possible psychotic break. They thought maybe she'd been exposed to some kind of gas leak." Ishikawa pulled up the incident reports, her frown deepening with each line of data. Gibson affected 3 Thorunian engineers who were nearby. They reported feeling unusually emotional, but it passed quickly. Williams' Benzari colleague filed a report about her delusional ramblings regarding listening devices, but security found nothing when they swept the area. She looked up sharply. Neither incident mentioned glowing boots or visible spores, and both happened when the affected humans were in close proximity to non-human crew members. "Maybe they didn't notice the visual effects, or maybe—" Rios paused, thinking about the progression. "Maybe it wasn't ready yet. Like it was learning, getting stronger." "Interesting." Ishikawa pulled up a new display. A 3-dimensional model that looked both organic and crystalline, like someone had crossed a mushroom with a complex geometric structure. "I've been analyzing the spore samples. They're showing unprecedented mutability. The organism is adapting to the ship's environment at an astonishing rate. Each generation becomes more efficient at transmission, but also more selective." She manipulated the model, highlighting specific protein chains. The spores only achieve full activation in the presence of specific biomarkers. Human combat stress hormones and certain non-human biochemistries. It's as if the organism requires multiple species to complete its life cycle. "You're saying it needs both humans and aliens?" "Exactly. And not just any aliens. Specific types. The pattern suggests it's been adapting to the biochemical signatures present on this ship, learning what it needs to achieve maximum effect." She pulled up another display, showing the ship's crew manifest. "Gibson was near Thorunians. Williams was with Benzari. And you were in direct contact with an Altarian. 3 different species, 3 different reaction patterns." The door hissed open, admitting 2 figures who couldn't have been more different. Ambassador Nesmo, of the Regoid Bureaucratic Collective, entered first. A 2-meter-tall insect with wings that shifted between bronze and green, her compound eyes reflecting Rio's image in thousands of tiny mirrors. Her exoskeleton was marked with intricate bureaucratic rank insignia, and her documentation tendrils were already recording everything. Behind her floated Dr. Yilin from Spore Prime, looking like someone had granted sentience to a particularly dignified mushroom and given it a medical degree. His cap-like head pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and his root-like appendages moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a being who measured time in seasons rather than seconds. "Sergeant Rios." Nesmos' voice was a series of sharp clicks, rendered into crisp, accusatory English by her translator. "Are you aware that Ambassador Shiala is still revealing classified information? She has progressed from military secrets to discussing her species' mating flights in extraordinary detail." Rios' face burned with embarrassment. "Ambassador, The Galactic Safety Council has convened an emergency session," Nesmo continued, her wings buzzing with agitation. 3 questions dominate the proceedings. How did extinct weaponized fungi come to inhabit human footwear? And how many more biological weapons are humans unknowingly carrying? And most critically, how do we stop this before the entire fleet is compromised? Furthermore, she added, consulting a datapad that appeared to be made of living metal, the Mokari delegation has filed a formal complaint
citing biological terrorism through inadequate species screening. The Zentran hive mind is threatening to withdraw from all treaties with contaminated species, and the Thorunian Empire has activated their home defense fleet. Dr. Yillen drifted closer to the containment unit, his cap-like head pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that might have been thought or emotion. When he spoke, his voice resonated from somewhere within his fruiting body, carrying undertones of decomposition and rebirth. "Fascinating," he murmured, extending sensory tendrils toward the sealed container. "And familiar." "Dr. Yillen is the galaxy's foremost expert on fungal organisms," Ishikawa explained. "His people evolved from colony structures similar to Earth's fungi, but they developed consciousness and chose symbiosis over parasitism." "Though considerably more sophisticated than most fungal networks," Yillen added with what might have been humor. His bioluminescent patterns shifted to deeper blues. "This biological signature has only been recorded once before, in a contested analysis of an impact event on your homeworld 80 years ago. At the time, my people's proposal that it was a predecessor cryopod was dismissed by your scientists as xenobiological fantasy." The room fell silent, except for the hum of containment fields and the soft whisper of recycled air. "You're saying the Queensland crater wasn't a meteor impact?" Ishikawa asked. "Your Queensland crater?" Yillen confirmed, his patterns shifting to what might have been remembrance. "The spectral analysis was inconclusive by human standards, but most people recognized the biosignatures. We theorized it was an escape pod containing biological archives from the predecessor empire's final days. Your scientists preferred the meteor explanation. It was more comfortable than admitting an alien technology had impacted your world." "The predecessors?" Nismo said with something approaching religious awe. "The empire that fell to its own bioweapons 10,000 years ago. The cautionary tale taught to every species that achieves spaceflight." "Not bioweapons," Yillen corrected gently. "Aggressive pacification protocols. They called it Euphoria Galacticus, a fungal organism designed to break down social barriers by including perfect bliss. While dissolving behavioral inhibitions, infected beings experienced complete joy while compulsively sharing everything. Resources, secrets, intimate thoughts. They literally became too happy to maintain the complex hierarchies and boundaries necessary for advanced civilization." "But why would the predecessors create something like that?" Rios asked. "Because they were dying," Yillen replied, his patterns dimming to somber purples. "Civil war, resource depletion, species-wide depression. They looked at their failing empire and decided the problem was separation, that beings couldn't understand each other, couldn't share genuine emotion across species lines. Euphoria Galacticus was their solution. Perfect empathy, perfect sharing, perfect unity." "And it destroyed them," Nemo added. "Within 50 years, the greatest civilization in galactic history had collapsed into chaos. Being too happy to work, too open to maintain privacy, too trusting to defend themselves, the ultimate pacification." "And this came from my boots?" Rio asked, staring at the containment unit. "That's the remarkable part," Yillen said, his patterns brightening with what might have been excitement. "Tell me, Sergeant, have you experienced anything unusual today? Dreams, perhaps? Unexplained compulsions?" "No, nothing like—" Rio paused, thinking. "Wait, last week, during shore leave on Centauri Station, I felt drawn to the botanical gardens. Spent 3 hours there, just walking around, couldn't explain why. Usually I prefer the recreation decks." "The gardens that specialize in preserved Earth species?" Ishikawa asked. "Yeah, they had this section on Australian flora, pre-extinction specimens. I must have spent an hour just staring at the eucalyptus trees, breathing in the scent. It was like coming home to a place I'd never been." Dr. Yillen's patterns flared with recognition. "The organism has been preparing. Your grandfather's unit was exposed to dormant spores from the predecessor pod. The spores integrated with organic materials, leather, fabric, even bone, waiting for the perfect conditions to activate. But they needed more than human stress hormones. They needed proximity to non-human biochemistries to complete their life cycle. So it's been waiting 80 years for the right moment? Learning, Yellen corrected. The organism has been adapting, understanding the biochemistries it would encounter, each generation becoming more sophisticated, more targeted. It's not trying to infect everything, it's trying to create controlled connection between species that would normally never share such intimate contact. But why now? Ishikawa pressed. Why on this ship? Because the Harmony's Edge is humanity's first truly integrated vessel, Yellen explained. Mixed crews, combined atmosphere, shared living spaces. For the first time in 80 years, humans carrying dormant spores were in close, prolonged contact with the exact biochemical signatures the organism was designed to respond to. An urgent chime interrupted them. Captain Santiago's face appeared on the main screen, her expression grim enough to age her 10 years. "Doctor, we have a situation. The contamination is spreading faster than we anticipated. 43 more cases reported across the fleet in the last 2 hours. It's jumping ships. Apparently the organism can survive brief exposure to vacuum, and it's showing signs of adapting to synthetic materials." Her jaw tightened. "The Galactic Council has moved up their vote. We have 20 minutes before they decide whether to classify humanity as a hostile biological entity. If that happens, complete quarantine," Nesmo finished. "No human vessel within a parsec of coalition space. Trade embargo, diplomatic isolation, complete severance of all contact." "The end of everything we've worked for since first contact," Santiago said. "Dr. Ishikawa, I need solutions, not history lessons. Can you fix this?" The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, Rios could hear his own heartbeat, the same rhythm that had pulsed through those purple veins. He thought about Gibson and Williams, about their careers destroyed by something they couldn't understand. He thought about his grandfather, walking through Australian ash and alien dreams, never knowing what he carried home. "There might be a way," he said slowly, "but you're not gonna like it." "Absolutely not!" Captain Santiago's voice could have frozen helium. "I will not authorize deliberately exposing personnel to a Class 3 biohazard. We have protocols for a reason." They stood in the sealed conference room. Santiago, Rios, Ishikawa, Yellen, and a very agitated Nesmo, with Ambassador Rostova, participating via secure hologram from the diplomatic section. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Earth hung like a blue marble against the void, beautiful and vulnerable. "Captain," Rio pressed, "I think I might have natural resistance. When I was 8, my grandfather took me camping near the Queensland crater. Family tradition, he said it was important to see where he'd served, to understand the weight of what we carry." Ishikawa's hands flew over her interfaces, pulling up childhood medical records. "There's a gap in your medical history around that time, a 2-week period where you were treated for an unknown fever." "Worst illness of my life," Rios confirmed. "Grandpa stayed up 3 nights straight taking care of me. Kept saying I was fighting something off, but the doctors couldn't figure out what. Temperature spiked to 104, hallucinations, the works." "Your antibody profiles from that period," Ishikawa said, highlighting specific markers on the display, "show clear signs of fighting off an unknown pathogen. The protein signatures are consistent with dormant spore exposure. Your immune system learned to recognize the threat without fighting a fully active infection." "You're saying I was inoculated as a child?" "In a sense. Your grandfather's gear, tents, sleeping bags, camping equipment, was probably contaminated with dormant spores. You were exposed to a weaker strain, possibly degraded by decades of storage. Your immune system developed recognition patterns without the full euphoric response." "If Dr. Ishikawa monitors my exposure under controlled conditions," Rios continued, "we might be able to understand the mechanism, use my blood plasma as a temporary treatment." "Might," Santiago emphasized. Or you might end up like Ambassador Shiala, sharing every embarrassing secret you've ever had while the fungus rewrites your neural chemistry. The fungus doesn't destroy tissue, Yellen interjected. It forms a temporary symbiotic relationship. Someone with childhood exposure to dormant spores could have developed the necessary resistance patterns to maintain control during active infection. With respect, Captain, Rios said, every minute we debate, the fungus is adapting. How long before it jumps to dress shoes, athletic gear, environmental suits? How long before every human on every ship is a potential vector? He has a point. Rostova's hologram flickered. I've been in communication with Earth Command. They're already discussing contingency plans if we're expelled from the coalition. Economic collapse within 6 months. Loss of all off-world colonies within 2 years. Some of the more aggressive species might even see us as requiring preemptive action. Furthermore, Nesmo added, her wings buzzing with agitation, the Council is already debating. Several delegates want humanity classified equivalent to the Devourers of Andromeda, a plague species requiring immediate neutralization. The room fell quiet. Through the window, a Regoid patrol craft drifted past, weapon systems visibly active. In the distance, the massive bulk of a Thorunian dreadnought was adjusting its position, moving to a more tactical formation. Santiago studied the data, the situation, the man volunteering to risk his sanity for humanity's future. She'd commanded ships through 3 different conflicts, had made decisions that affected thousands of lives, but this was different. Sergeant Rios, she said finally, I need to ask you this officially. Understanding the risks, understanding that this could end very badly for you personally, are you volunteering for controlled exposure to a Class 3 biohazard? Rios thought about Earth, hanging vulnerable in the dark, about humanity's dreams of joining something larger than themselves, about his grandfather's boots carrying an ancient message across time and space. Yes, ma'am, I volunteer. Dr. Ishikawa, you have 30 minutes to convince me this won't end in complete disaster. Understood, Captain. The preparation took 25 minutes. Ishikawa's lab had been transformed into a medical fortress, containment fields layered 6 deep, sensors covering every conceivable spectrum, enough computational power to model molecular interactions in real time. Emergency medical teams stood ready with everything from neural inhibitors to complete life support systems. Rios sat in the isolation chamber wearing only medical scrubs and his grandfather's boots. The leather felt different now, pregnant with possibility and history. He could feel the dormant spores responding to his elevated heart rate, beginning to stir. Biosigns stable, Ishikawa reported from the control room. She tried to keep her tone clinical, but Rios could hear the concern underneath. Remember, the moment you feel loss of control, we flood the chamber with neural inhibitors. Your safety is the priority. Beginning exposure protocol, Yellen announced from his position at the atmospheric controls. Introducing combat stress hormones and simulated multi-species atmosphere. The chemical cocktail hit Rios' system like liquid lightning. His heart rate spiked, muscles tensed, every sense sharpened. His body knew this song, the biochemistry of combat, the edge between control and chaos that every Marine learned to walk. His boots responded immediately. Purple veins spread across the leather in intricate patterns, far more complex than before. They pulsed with bioluminescent intensity, creating fractals of light that seemed to have their own logic. The tingling sensation raced up his legs, but this time Rios was ready for it. He could feel the fungus trying to establish its connection, seeking the neural pathways that would let it flood his system with artificial bliss. Endorphin levels rising, Ishikawa called out. Serotonin production increasing rapidly. But wait, look at his antibody response. On the displays, Rios' immune system was mounting a coordinated defense unlike anything they'd seen. His white blood cells weren't attacking the fungal spores, they were communicating with them, establishing boundaries, creating a controlled dialogue. It's intense, Rios managed, his voice tight with concentration. Like the best runner's high times 10, but I can feel my body negotiating with it, keeping it contained. Antibody production is extraordinary, Yellen confirmed, his patterns flashing with excitement. His immune system isn't destroying the fungus, it's creating a dialogue. These proteins are establishing boundaries, controlled exchange. The purple light pulsed, flared, then began to stabilize rather than fade. In that moment of perfect balance, Rios felt something else, a presence, ancient and patient, touching his mind with infinite gentleness. We meant only connection, it seemed to say, understanding across the void. We failed in the method, but not the dream. Sergeant, Ishikawa's voice was tight with concern. Any compulsions? Uncontrollable urges to share secrets? Rios looked up, meeting her eyes through the observation window. His pupils were dilated, but his expression was clear and focused. Just gratitude, Doc, for everyone who's helping me make this work. And I can feel what it wants. It's not malicious. It's lonely. It's been carrying a message for 10,000 years, and it just wants to be understood. Through the lab windows, alarms were sounding throughout the ship. Captain Santiago's voice boomed over the comm system. All hands, code yellow. The infection is spreading to other ships. Medical teams to affected areas. Dr. Ishikawa, whatever you're doing, do it faster. Council vote in 10 minutes. The blood plasma, Ishikawa said suddenly. Can we extract it while you're in controlled symbiosis? Do it, Rios replied. But Doc, whatever you synthesize, make sure it doesn't kill the fungus. It's been trying to complete its mission for 10,000 years. Maybe it's time we listened. Get me out of here, Rios said as the extraction completed. My blood plasma, can you synthesize an aerosol treatment? Already working on it, Ishikawa replied, her hands flying over the controls. But even if we can create an effective treatment, the Council will vote before we can prove it works. Rios stood, still wearing his grandfather's boots. The purple veins pulsed gently, synchronized with his heartbeat. Then we tell them the truth. All of it. Sergeant. The whole truth. About the predecessors, about what this fungus really is, about why my grandfather's boots carried their dream for 80 years. He looked at each of them in turn. They tried to create peace. They failed. But maybe their failure can teach us something about connection without losing ourselves. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was pandemonium incarnate. The ancient amphitheater, a station older than some civilizations, resonated with the discordant voices of 43 species arguing in as many languages. Universal translators strained under the load, creating cascades of meaning that threatened to overwhelm even synthetic minds. Emergency lighting bathed everything in harsh red, while security fields created barriers between different species groups. The tension was palpable. Several delegations had their defensive systems active, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained hostility. The question before us, the Council's ancient moderating AI intoned, is whether to classify humanity as a hostile biological entity with all associated quarantine regulations. The vote will be called in 3 minutes. The evidence is overwhelming, rumbled the Mokari delegate, their silicon body ringing with each word like a living bell. Humans have brought a predecessor bioweapon onto our ships. The infection now spreads beyond their control. 3 more vessels report contamination. 3 of my hive sisters are composing epic poetry about their egg-laying procedures, clicked the Zenthran representative, their eyes reflecting the emergency lighting in fractal patterns. This is intolerable. Their dignity has been compromised. Such intimate knowledge was never meant to be shared. On the main screen, chaos played out across the fleet. Benzari choirs sang their deepest secrets in harmonies that revealed the secrets of their souls. Rigoid bureaucrats embraced while sharing administrative fears that had haunted them for decades. Hardened warriors of a dozen species wept openly while revealing their deepest regrets. The contamination spreads exponentially, added the Thorunian delegate, scales rippling with distress. Our own crew members are beginning to shed an emotional response. This is biological warfare of the most insidious kind. A vote will be called in 60 seconds unless... I request the floor. Rios' transmission cut through the chaos like a blade. He appeared on the main screen, still wearing medical scrubs and his grandfather's boots, the purple veins now glowing with steady, gentle light. "Sergeant Rios," the AI acknowledged, "you are not a recognized delegate. On what grounds do you claim speaking privileges?" "On the grounds that I'm the first human to survive controlled exposure to Euphoria galacticus with full immunity. On the grounds that I carry in my blood the foundation for a treatment. And on the grounds that you're about to make the same mistake the predecessors did, destroying something instead of understanding it." The council fell silent. Even the emergency klaxon seemed to quiet in anticipation. "You have 90 seconds, the AI decided. Rios took a breath, feeling the weight of history, his grandfather's legacy, humanity's future, the ancient dream of a long-dead civilization. "Distinguished delegates, I stand before you wearing the boots that started this crisis. My grandfather wore them through the ashes of Queensland, never knowing he was walking through the wreckage of someone else's dream. For 80 years, they carried dormant spores. Not a weapon, but a message. He held up a vial of blood plasma, its contents glowing with the same purple light as his boots. The predecessors called it Euphoria galacticus, but that's not what they intended. They looked at a galaxy full of species that couldn't understand each other, that fought and feared and failed to connect. And they asked a simple question. What if everyone could share genuine emotion? What if barriers could come down safely, voluntarily? "They failed!" interrupted the Altarian delegate's replacement, a younger being whose structure flickered with agitation. "The Empire fell. Trillions died." "They failed because they forced unity," Rios agreed. "They didn't understand that connection without choice isn't connection at all. But look at your screens. Look at what's happening. Yes, your crew members are sharing secrets. Yes, it's chaotic. But are they suffering? Are they dying? Or are they connecting in ways they never thought possible?" "You propose we accept this contamination?" The Mokari delegate's tone could have frozen stars. "I propose we learn from it." Rios gestured to the medical data streaming beside his image. "My immune system has created a dialogue with the fungus. Not destruction, cooperation, controlled exposure, voluntary connection. The organism has evolved too. It's not trying to destroy barriers anymore, it's trying to create bridges." The vote timer showed 30 seconds. "The spores in my blood can create a treatment. Not a cure that destroys the fungus, but a moderator that allows choice. Imagine diplomatic negotiations where all parties can voluntarily share genuine emotion. Peace treaties signed by beings who've actually felt each other's hopes and fears." On the screens, the images were changing. The initial chaos was giving way to something else. Understanding. A human engineer worked side by side with a Thorunian philosopher, both smiling with genuine warmth. A Benzari trader shared childhood memories with a Rigoid bureaucrat who'd learned to appreciate beauty beyond efficiency. "My grandfather's boots walked through hell," Rios said quietly. "They carried him through humanity's worst moments. War, disaster, the edge of extinction. That they also carried an alien dream of connection? That's not contamination. That's evolution. That's the universe telling us we're all trying to understand each other whether we admit it or not." 10 seconds, the AI announced. "We're not asking for trust," Rio finished. "We're offering proof. The treatment works. The connection can be controlled. Don't punish humanity for accidentally carrying someone else's hope. Let us help you turn their failure into something better." The vote was called. One by one, delegates registered their decisions. The chamber filled with the soft chimes of electronic voting, each sound carrying the weight of species-wide decisions. When the final tally appeared, humanity remained in the coalition by a margin of 3 votes. "However," the AI continued, "strict protocols must be implemented. The organism must be studied and contained. Regular bioscans will be mandatory for all human personnel. And Sergeant Rios." "Yes?" "Your boots will be retired to the archive of xenobiological incidents. They are too significant to remain in active service." Rios looked down at his grandfather's legacy, still glowing with gentle purple light. Understood, but I have one request. Let them be displayed as an example of how understanding can grow from the most unexpected places. Let them teach future generations that sometimes the most profound connections come from the most unlikely sources. Accepted. Session adjourned. Through the windows of the council chamber, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the species that traveled between them. But in the space between those stars, something had changed. In the chaos of forced connection, beings were choosing to maintain some of those links, to remember what it felt like to share understanding without losing themselves. The predecessors had failed in their method, but not their vision. And sometimes, the most profound victories come not from conquest, but from learning to walk in each other's shoes. 11 months later, the Harmony's Edge hosted another diplomatic reception. This time the atmosphere was different, warmer, more connected. The controlled euphoria treatments had revolutionized interspecies diplomacy, creating optimal emotional bridges that allowed unprecedented understanding. Rio stood in the receiving line wearing regulation synthetic boots that made his feet sweat. Behind him, in a place of honor, a display case held his grandfather's boots, still faintly glowing with purple light, a reminder that the most profound connections often come from the most unexpected places. The memorial scheduled for next month, Captain Santiago informed him during a quiet moment. They're calling it the Euphoric Incident Memorial. Apparently, it's going to be a permanent exhibit on the nature of voluntary connection. My grandfather would have found that funny, Rio said. He just thought he was wearing good boots. Across the room, he spotted Dr. Ishikawa, reviewing data from their latest research. The controlled euphoria therapy was showing remarkable results, not just in diplomacy, but in treating trauma, depression, and species-wide isolation disorders that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. She caught his eye and smiled. That particular smile that suggested their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper. Sergeant Rios, a melodious voice drew his attention. Ambassador Shiala approached, her form shimmering with carefully controlled luminescence. I wanted to thank you personally. Your actions saved not just humanity's standing, but gave us all a glimpse of what connection without conquest might look like. Ambassador, I'm just glad that we found a way to make it work for everyone. Indeed. Did you know I've started a collection of human poetry? Some experiences are worth preserving, even if they came from unexpected revelation. Your species has a remarkable way of finding beauty in chaos. As she drifted away, Rios felt Ishikawa slip her arm through his. You know, she said, our research is going to change how species interact for generations to come. The applications are endless. Therapy, education, even artistic collaboration. Rios smiled, looking at the display case where his grandfather's boots continued their gentle glow. I think Grandpa would have liked that. He always said the best victories were the ones where everyone went home better than they started. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, connected by invisible threads of trade and treaty, fear and friendship. The predecessor's dream had failed in its original form, but found new life in its aftermath. Sometimes the best way to unite diverse species wasn't to force them to feel the same joy, but to give them the choice to share understanding.